My name is Elena Rivers, and I'm 30 years old. I work as a custom furniture maker, crafting handmade tables, chairs, and home decor pieces for clients along the East Coast. It's a job I built from the ground up, with splinters in my palms and paint stains that never quite wash off. I live in a modest but cozy apartment in Lakeshore, Maine, where the smell of cedar and sawdust clings to the walls like an old friend. But despite carving out a life I'm proud of, the deepest scars I carry weren't caused by sharp tools. They were left by my own family. I was born into the Rivers household, where appearances mattered more than affection, and love came with conditions. My parents, Gail and Richard Rivers, ran a high-end antiques business. To outsiders, they were elegant and charming. But inside our home, everything was about control, status, and comparisons. My younger sister, Bella, was always the star, the favorite, the one who could do no wrong. While I was being scolded for making messy art projects as a kid, Bella's crooked crayon drawings were framed and hung like they were precious heirlooms. It wasn't about talent. It was about compliance. Bella followed rules. I asked questions. That alone made me the outsider. As we grew older, the differences in how we were treated became impossible to ignore. Bella was sent to music camps, got private singing lessons, and attended a fancy performing arts academy. I was pushed into business electives, expected to help in the family store after school, and told that working with my hands was unfeminine. When I applied to a craft and design school in Vermont and got accepted, they barely acknowledged it. When I turned down an offer to work at my parents' antique shop and started making furniture on my own, my mother's words rang in my ears. "You're turning your back on your family. Don't come running to us when it all falls apart." But it didn't fall apart. I made it. Slowly. Painfully. With long nights in a rented garage workshop and clients who paid in installments. But I made it. I didn't owe them a dime. Still, every family visit was like stepping back into a trap. It all changed, got worse really, when Bella announced she was getting married. Gail was ecstatic. Within hours, she was calling it the biggest event Lakeshore has ever seen. Her excitement wasn't just maternal, it was theatrical. The groom, Ethan Caldwell, was polished, quiet, and came from one of those well-established families in upstate New York who owned vineyards and sent Christmas cards on thick paper. He wasn't my type, but he was exactly theirs. When I congratulated Bella, she hugged me tightly and whispered, "I'm so glad you're here, Elena. I know you'll make everything beautiful." At the time, I thought she meant as a guest, a supportive sister. 2 weeks later, I was invited to dinner at my parents' house. More like summon, really. Their Victorian home in East Lakeshore hadn't changed. Gleaming hardwood floors, pristine white curtains, and that suffocating air of staged perfection. Even the fireplace smelled more like polished brass than actual firewood. Dinner was roast chicken with rosemary, overcooked and dry. The conversation, as always, was civil but cold. Then Gail set down her wineglass and gave me that smile, the one that always came right before a demand. "We've been talking about the wedding," she began sweetly. "The main things are handled: venue, dress, catering. But there are still so many creative touches left. And you have such a good eye, darling." Bella leaned in, almost gleeful. "Like the decor, signage, favors. You're amazing with all that." Richard cleared his throat. "You're not married yet, Elena. This is your chance to really show up for the family." I hadn't even said a word. "It's what you do, isn't it?" Gail added lightly, as if my professional design commissions for boutique interiors and cafes were just hobbies. "Making things." I didn't have a choice, not really. Saying no in that house wasn't allowed. So I said, "Sure, I'll help." But in my gut, I knew this wasn't a request. It was the start of something deeper, another slow theft of my time, my energy, and eventually my savings. The very next morning, my inbox was flooded. Subject lines like floral arch ideas, engraved cutlery options, and custom velvet guestbooks stacked up like unpaid bills. Gail and Bella had sent me Pinterest boards filled with over-the-top inspiration, hanging chandeliers made of wildflowers, imported lace linens, scented invitation boxes, things that cost more than I made in 2 months. The word help had quickly morphed into do it all. And there was no discussion about who was paying. At first, I tried to stay within reason. I sourced local vendors, designed elegant signs by hand, and drafted mood boards with simple but meaningful aesthetics. But every suggestion I made was met with some variation of too basic. This doesn't pop enough. Elena, this is Bella's only wedding. I proposed a sustainable local florist. Gail rolled her eyes. We're not arranging a farmer's market. She needs luxury. Bella emailed me a link to orchid chandeliers priced at $4,200 and simply wrote, "These would totally elevate the space. We have to have them." I stared at the price tag. That was 2 months of my rent. I reminded them, kindly at first, that I wasn't a wedding planner. I had clients and deadlines. I ran a business. But my mother shrugged it off. You work from home, don't you? That means flexible hours. No one saw the 14-hour days I was already pulling, or the fact that I was skipping paid work to fulfill their minor tasks. I coordinated the entire engagement party at a lakeside vineyard an hour away. I designed Bella's wedding website, printed guest programs, and arranged custom gifts for the bridesmaids, all out of my own pocket. At first, it was little things, $200 here, $400 there. But then came the deposits. A $600 hold for calligraphy printing, $850 for silk ribbons. And it kept snowballing. At every family dinner, instead of asking how I was doing, they asked, "Did you confirm the table runners? When's the signage arriving? Have you finalized the cake topper yet?" It was like I'd become the unpaid employee of a family machine, one that never ran out of demands. The exhaustion showed in my face. The stress seeped into my bones. And still, I kept giving. Because deep down, I thought, maybe if I did this perfectly, they'd finally see my worth. But what they saw was someone they could keep taking from. It wasn't until a rainy Saturday afternoon, sitting across from my best friend Naomi, that I realized how bad things had gotten. We were at our favorite corner cafe, and I must have looked like a ghost. Dark circles, stained hoodie, and hands trembling from too much coffee and not enough rest. She didn't even wait for her latte to cool. "Elena, you look wrecked," she said, blunt as ever. "What are they doing to you?" I tried to explain how I just wired another $500 to the invitation vendor, how I was missing deadlines for actual paying clients, and how my apartment now looked like a wedding supply warehouse. Naomi's voice was low but firm. "You're being used. Not included, used. Why are you still doing it?" I looked down at my chipped mug and whispered, "Because maybe if I do this right, they'll finally treat me like I matter. Like I belong." She reached across the table, grabbed my wrist, and said, "They're not going to. They only know how to take from you." I didn't respond, because I knew she was right. But the fear of saying no, of being labeled difficult, selfish, dramatic, still had its claws in me. Those were the words Gail had always thrown at me whenever I stood up for myself. So I went home. And I didn't stop. I kept working. My dining table disappeared beneath piles of napkin samples and wax-sealed envelopes. My workshop sat abandoned while I spent nights designing seating charts and editing photos for Bella's slideshow. I was skipping meals, canceling client orders, fading. Then one night, I opened my budget spreadsheet to see the damage and nearly choked. $21,860. That's how much I had spent. On my sister's wedding. Out of my own pocket. And it still wasn't enough. A week before the big day, I was summoned to one final planning meeting at my parents' house. Gail presented it like a casual idea. We were thinking the table linens should be upgraded. The basic white just looks so cold. Bella chimed in, sipping tea like royalty. "There's this champagne silk with pearl stitching. It's divine." "That's another $1,200, I said flatly. Gail waved her hand. "It's worth it for the photos. You care about presentation, don't you?" I didn't respond. Then came the final gut punch. "Oh, and the venue deposit is due Friday," Gail added with false cheer. I blinked. "Wasn't Dad covering the venue?" "He was," she said casually. "But there was an issue with some antique import delays." Just a short-term liquidity issue. If you can cover it now, we'll reimburse you. I almost laughed. Reimburse you had become their favorite lie. Still, I nodded. Then went home, opened my banking app, and transferred the money. My savings were now under $1,000. My down payment for future home?
Gone.
And the scariest part? I was starting to feel numb. The only person who noticed was Naomi. She showed up that night with Thai takeout and fury in her eyes. When she saw my living room stacked with boxes and half-finished wedding signs, she snapped. This is insane. They've hijacked your life. That's when I broke. I collapsed onto the floor and sobbed, loud, breathless sobs I hadn't allowed myself to feel in months. Naomi just held me, and when I could finally breathe again, she whispered, "You are not their wedding planner. You're not their purse. You're their daughter, and they've made you feel like neither." That night, I opened my laptop and pulled every receipt, every invoice, every bank record. I calculated everything again. $27,000. That was the cost of my silence. The morning of Bella's wedding arrived with fake smiles and real dread. The venue, an extravagant seaside estate just outside Mariner's Bluff, was pristine. White orchids dangled from the trellises. Champagne linens draped every table. Each place card was hand-lettered by me the night before because, of course, the calligrapher wasn't quite right. Guests wandered the manicured grounds in pastel dresses and tailored suits, sipping mimosas. Everyone seemed relaxed. Except me. I hadn't slept. I was running on caffeine, anxiety, and resentment. The staff thought I was the paid coordinator. Not a single person corrected them. Gail even told someone, "Oh, Elena loves this kind of thing. She thrives on it." I didn't correct her either. I just kept moving, making sure the cake had arrived, checking the guest list, adjusting the arch decorations that had begun to sag slightly in the breeze. Then came the final task, delivering the welcome sign to the bridal suite. I had hand-painted it myself on aged pine, sealed with gold foil lettering. When I entered the suite, Bella sat before the mirror in her custom gown. Gail fluffed the train while Richard stood by the window checking his watch. Then I saw it. My wallet, open on the makeup table. My phone, screen lit up, with the banking app open. My mother's finger was still hovering above the screen when she noticed me. I froze. My voice dropped to a whisper. "What are you doing?" She didn't even look guilty. Just annoyed. "Don't be dramatic. Did you just transfer money from my account?" She sighed, rolling her eyes. "We needed something special for Bella. Just a little necklace. She deserves to shine today." I stepped forward, heartbeat in my throat. "That's not your money." Bella scoffed, applying her lipstick. "Elena, relax. You're always so intense. Besides, you said you cared more about people than things, remember?" My father said nothing, just turned away. I gritted my teeth. "How much did you take?" Gail tilted her head like I was a child throwing a tantrum. "Only 10,000. Don't ruin your sister's day with your selfishness." And that was it. Something inside me broke. For the first time in years, I didn't bite my tongue. I didn't fake a smile. I looked Gail directly in the eye and said, "You stole from me." Her face shifted. The fake charm fell away. And in an instant she charged forward. Before I could move, she grabbed my head with both hands and slammed it onto the wooden vanity. Crack. Pain exploded through my forehead. My vision went white. I stumbled backward and collapsed into a chair. Blood streamed down my face. One of the makeup artists screamed. The room erupted into chaos. The hotel manager, Oliver, had been walking by the hallway when he heard the commotion. He stormed in, took one look at me, then pressed the panic button under the wall sconce. Within 2 minutes, paramedics and police burst through the door. As an EMT held a bandage to my head, checking for concussion signs, I could only sit there, dizzy, bleeding, and strangely calm. Because I realized they'd shown everyone who they really were. And this time, I had witnesses. The hotel suite was a war zone of whispers, tension, and shock. Guests in the hallway stared, wide-eyed, as paramedics checked my pulse and officers questioned the witnesses. Blood stained my shirt, and my hands were still trembling, but I finally felt in control. Gail stood to the side, her face frozen in rage, not remorse. She didn't even try to deny it. The lead officer, Sergeant Blake, asked the shaken makeup artist what she'd seen. Her voice cracked as she pointed at Gail. She slammed her daughter's head onto the table. I saw the whole thing. Oliver, the hotel manager, added, I triggered the panic alert as soon as I walked in. I saw blood. Elena was hurt and clearly assaulted. Within minutes, Gail was handcuffed. As the officers read her rights, Bella screamed, This is insane. You can't arrest her. It's my wedding day. But Sergeant Blake's voice didn't flinch. Your wedding is no excuse for felony assault. I turned toward Richard and Bella, both still standing there like statues, silent and expressionless. I looked straight at the officers. They knew. They watched it happen. They've been part of this for years. Bella opened her mouth to speak, but I cut her off. I have emails, texts, bank records. She didn't do this alone. Sergeant Blake nodded. We'll need to take all three of them in for questioning. The look on Bella's face was pure disbelief. As if for the first time, there were consequences. And just when I thought the day couldn't twist further, Ethan, her fiancé, who had arrived late, walked in through the chaos. He looked at me, then at Bella. Then at Gail being escorted out in handcuffs. What the hell happened? Bella rushed toward him. Baby, it's not what it looks like. But Ethan didn't buy it. He looked at me, looked at the blood, then at the officers. Is this true? Your family did this. I nodded once. He stepped back from Bella and said firmly, I'm calling off the wedding. I'm sorry, Elena. I had no idea. Bella shrieked. No, you're overreacting. But Ethan was already walking away. And in that moment, I stood up, bandaged, bruised, but finally done. You treated me like a servant, then like a thief. But I'm not staying silent anymore. I'll be pressing charges. Against all of you. And this time I meant it. The very next morning, I walked into the law office of Miles Donovan, a sharp but kind attorney who specialized in family abuse and financial exploitation. I still had a bandage on my forehead, and the receptionist offered me a glass of water the moment she saw me. I sat across from Miles with my flash drive, notebook, and a manila folder stuffed with printouts, bank transfers, emails, screenshots of messages, and even photographs of invoices I had paid. I told him everything from the manipulation to the assault. He listened carefully, flipping through the pages. After a long pause, he said, You've got an airtight case, Elena. We'll go after all three of them. Gail for assault and theft, Richard for financial complicity, and Bella for fraud and coordinated misuse of funds. I exhaled. Within a week, formal charges were filed. The security footage from the hotel, clear as day, captured the exact moment my mother slammed my head onto the vanity. Eyewitness accounts from the makeup artist, hotel manager, and staff were submitted alongside my medical evaluation. Paramedic reports confirmed the concussion. Gail was charged with aggravated assault and financial theft. Richard was charged with accessory to financial abuse. He had authorized multiple unauthorized withdrawals from shared family accounts. Bella was charged with fraud and intentional exploitation based on her direct involvement in encouraging me to fund the wedding under false pretenses. The courtroom was packed the day of the final hearing. I wore a simple black dress. No makeup, no flair, just focus. Across from me sat the three people who once called me family. Their defense tried everything: stress, miscommunication, a misunderstanding blown out of proportion. But none of it worked. Not with the mountain of evidence I had. When the judge asked if I had anything to say before sentencing, I stood and said clearly, this wasn't about a wedding. This was about control, theft, and years of emotional abuse. They saw me as disposable, but I'm not, and I won't let them erase me. The judge nodded solemnly before delivering the sentences. Gail Rivers, 3 years in state prison, 2 for assault, 1 for theft, served consecutively. No early parole, due to the violent nature of the crime. A Richard Rivers, 6 months in county jail, and a $10,000 restitution fine for enabling and co-signing the thefts. Bella Rivers, 8 months in jail and ordered to repay $15,000 in damages for fraud and financial manipulation. None of them looked at me. Not once. But I didn't need their remorse. I wasn't doing this for closure. I was doing it for justice. And when I walked out of that courthouse, I walked out free for the first time in my life. After the trial ended, the world felt strangely quiet. There were no more urgent texts, no more guilt-laced voicemails, no more inboxes flooded with requests. I moved out of my small lakeshore apartment and found a peaceful studio loft in a seaside town called Bayhaven, just outside of Portland. It wasn't fancy, but it was mine. Sunlight poured in through tall windows each morning, warming the hardwood floors. I filled the space with handmade shelves, soft rugs, and one oversized chair that I sank into every evening with a book or my sketch pad. A few weeks after the sentencing, with Miles's help, I filed a civil lawsuit for damages. It didn't make headlines, but it gave me closure. The judge granted me $35,000 in restitution, pulled from frozen assets and forced estate withdrawals. It wouldn't undo the years of neglect or the betrayal, but it restored the financial ground I'd lost. Still, the real healing came from somewhere else. I reconnected with my old creative love, photography. Before woodworking took over, I used to capture raw portraits of people, real people. Emotions, stories, laughter, pain. I dug out my old camera, updated the lens, and started offering weekend portrait sessions around Bayhaven. And slowly something clicked. I launched a new brand, Elena Gray Studio. I redesigned my website, combining custom furniture and lifestyle photography. Word spread. Clients began tagging me in posts. Then a small feature in a New England design blog put me on the radar of several boutique businesses. I wasn't just rebuilding, I was thriving. One evening, sitting at my workbench, I opened my laptop and hit record. Hi, I'm Elena. I'm 30 years old. And this is how I survived being erased by my own family and reclaimed everything they tried to take. That unscripted video, shot in soft lamp light with me in a flannel hoodie and no makeup, exploded overnight. Within a week, it passed 250,000 views. Comments flooded in, some heartbreaking, some empowering. This is my story, too. Thank you for speaking up. I thought I was alone. You gave me the courage to leave. Inspired, I started a YouTube series called Breaking the Pattern. I shared my full story, every detail. I brought on legal guests to discuss financial abuse, counselors to talk about emotional trauma, and even featured survivors who had once felt voiceless. It wasn't about revenge. It was about visibility. Then came a message that stuck with me. A young woman named Callie, who'd been manipulated by her parents into surrendering control of her college fund. She'd watched every episode. She reached out timidly, unsure of what to do. I connected her to a nonprofit that helps young women navigate legal and financial independence. Helping her felt like closing the last chapter of the nightmare I once lived. Now, nearly a year has passed since that wedding that never happened. Since the blood, the panic button, the flashing lights outside a bridal suite. But those things no longer define me. Today, I wake up in a place I chose. I walk the beach with my camera. I drink tea with Naomi, who never once gave up on me. I laugh more. I cry less. And I do not take silence anymore. Gail sent a letter from prison, 4 pages of apologies. I read the first 2 lines, folded it quietly, and placed it in the drawer without replying. A month later, Bella tried emailing me a photo of us from childhood. She wrote, "Maybe we can try again someday?" I didn't respond. They lost the right to know me the moment they decided I was only valuable when I was useful. And yet, I'm not bitter. I'm free. Last week, I stood on a panel at a women's business conference in Boston. My keynote? The cost of being the good daughter, and why I stopped paying it. Dozens of women lined up afterward. Some hugged me, some cried, but all of them saw me. And for the first time, I saw myself too. The scars didn't disappear, but they no longer controlled my reflection. My name is Elena Grace Rivers. I'm 30 years old. And I'm no one's scapegoat anymore. I'm the author of my own story. And this piece? It's mine. Forever. After I closed that chapter for good, I realized something powerful. There are thousands of others like me. People trapped in family dynamics that rob them of self-worth, silence their voices, and drain their resources. Some don't even realize it's abuse because it's dressed up as tradition, expectation, or loyalty. That's why I kept sharing. Not to relive the pain, but to create a roadmap for others to get out. Through Elena Gray's studio, I now offer more than photography or handmade furniture. I offer stories, visual, spoken, written. Stories that reflect resilience. That say, you're allowed to walk away. You're allowed to choose yourself. The YouTube series has grown into a full platform. I speak on podcasts, at support groups, and online forums. Sometimes I get overwhelmed reading messages from viewers, teachers, nurses, single moms, college students, all saying the same thing. Thank you. You made me feel seen. But I always respond with this. You were never invisible. You just needed someone to turn on the light. If you're reading this or watching my story now, maybe with your own quiet pain in your chest, know that healing is not only possible, it's yours to claim. You don't owe your silence to anyone. You don't owe loyalty to abusers, blood or not. And most importantly, you don't have to wait for permission to be free. So here's to the ones breaking the cycle. Here's to the ones rebuilding with their own hands, their own hearts, their own stories. Here's to you, Elena.